to the next speaker, which is Stephanie, but thank you, Mateo.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that I love being able to do at HalfStack, go ahead and set up Stephanie while I distract the audience from you, is to just like introduce you to things that I think are cool that I just randomly stumble across over the course of time. So HalfStack is kind of this mix of like, that's a really cool project, let's get the creator to come out and talk about it. Or that's a really creative thing that's ridiculous, let's see that on stage, or whatever. And that's kind of how the conference came to be, and why. There's not necessarily a particular rhyme or reason for what is a HalfStack talk versus not, but generally it's like, would I want to watch that talk live, or would I rather read it as a blog post? And if it fits into the former, then generally it'll get on stage. So. This talk actually was proposed to me at the last HalfStack in September, and Stephanie was like, hey, I've got this idea for a talk, and it's like design systems and memes. I'm like, yes. And she's like, well, how about I tell you more? I'm like, you can do that too, but that just sounds like kind of a typical HalfStack headline, and it should be fun. And no pressure. But this is Stephanie Shaw from Beamery. A round of applause for Stephanie.
So, hi, I'm Stephanie, and during the day, I'm a senior front-end engineer at Beamery. I'm currently working on adding some AI into our talent management lifecycle platform to help recruiters rely less on cognitive shortcuts and unconscious bias and more on real data-driven insights. But in the evenings, I'm usually just noodling about on the internet making memes. And I also happen to enjoy design systems, so I thought, why not give a talk about both of them? You might be wondering, I'm on this lineup today, you might think, oh, Stephanie Shaw must be some sort of design system expert or thought leader. That's really not the case. I've had a pretty disastrous track record in my career so far. I've been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you'll see that being a design system expert is not among my achievements. But I'm just here because I happen to think that design systems are pretty neat. So let's talk about design systems. They're everywhere nowadays. We interact with them on all sorts of different devices, from smartphones to smart TVs, even smart speakers. And it's not just confined nowadays to tech giants like Meta, Google, and Twitter, but even startups and scale-ups like Beamery, or government services, or charities, or even just people at home creating a blog or a store for their, crochet that they do. And really, although design systems are pretty trendy nowadays, this ubiquitization of design systems have really just like upgraded and upskilled what people expect of user experience nowadays. Long gone are the days of GeoCities. Nowadays, users expect a great user experience with accessibility. They want it to be intuitive. They want it to be bug-free, and they want to have a beautiful thing to look at. And design systems can help with that. And it also helps that they have, cool names like Carbon and Lightning. But you know what else has cool names and is kind of trendy? Cryptocurrencies and NFTs. And I kind of was thinking that design systems are similar in that regard, in that perhaps people are investing in design systems without really understanding what they really are, or how they actually work, or how they deliver the supposed value that they bring. So if you want to understand what a design system is, you don't know, and you type it into Google, then you'll get all sorts of different definitions out, which are frankly packed with jargon and buzzwords, single source of truth, it's interconnected patterns and shared practices, coherently organized, or, systematic approach with guidelines, principles, and philosophies. Frankly, no wonder people get confused about it. One misconception that I've come across more often than I'd like to say is that, people think sometimes that a design system is basically just a component library for your organization, but somehow fancier, except they're not quite sure what the fancy bit is. And if that's really your understanding of a design system, then what's really stopping you from taking your boring old component library and giving it a new, sexier name? And if we carry on in that direction, then we might think, well, how about you just take anything which could be considered a component library or set of patterns and make that into a design system? In which case, well, memes are components and reusable patterns, so are memes a design system? But what I'm really trying to get at here isn't, are memes a design system? We know that's silly. But what is a design system. And I'm hoping today, by looking at design systems through the lens of memes, that we, well, have a bit of a laugh, and also learn a bit more about what is that secret sauce that makes design systems. So let's get started with the case for why memes are sort of like a design system, and we're going to be featuring some examples from Beamery's work in progress design system as well. So to start off with, design systems contain components, which are reusable building blocks you can piece together to create products, such as the humble button, pretty much in every design system in existence. And memes, well, memes are reusable building blocks that you can piece together to tell jokes or express some sort of sentiment. Now, components allow you to customize the content to suit your particular use case. For example, we can change the text in the button or add an icon. And of course, we know that memes allow you to customize the content to suit your particular use case as well, whether that's adding some icons and different text, or even using different memes in your memes. Components have variations which change the way they look while still working in much the same way, which provides people using the design system a certain level of flexibility to solve problems in the specific way that they need. So, for example, in Beamery's design system, we have various different the close button one doesn't show very well on the screen, but it's we have a nice red color for destructive actions, so let people know that they're about to do something potentially dangerous, or close button, which is a more neutral color for secondary actions. And memes can also have variations which change the way they look while still working in the same way. So, for example, if you'd only ever seen Stonks Man before, as soon as you come across not Stonks or confused Stonks, you have a pretty good idea how it works, even though it's completely new material. So design systems contain guidelines that tell you how to use the component correctly in the wild. So as an example from the Beamery design system, you can see we have a piece of guidance here for our button, which tells us there should only be one primary button on the page, and that all of the other actions should have a lower emphasis. And that's really to help people understand what they're expected to do when they're visiting a page. It's like if they have a button that's brighter than the others, they think, that's what I'm usually supposed to press. And we have as well some examples of good practice and bad practice. And memes, well, they sort of have guidelines as well that tell you how to use the meme correctly. I mean, often they're just inferred or unwritten, but sometimes they will be written down somewhere as well. In the case of this classic, is this a pigeon meme? You can label the butterfly as object A. You have a label for the person who is an idiot making an observation, and then you have text at the bottom in the format, is this B? Where there's some sort of contrast between A and B. And we can have an example of a good practice and also bad practice. So you can use components to create other components that have new and more complex meanings. So we often call this atomic design, where you'll start off with small components, your atoms, and then the atoms can be combined together into molecules or slightly more complicated components. So if you think about our button example, that could be a button, and then using buttons together to form a toolbar, and then you can combine toolbars into a rich user experience. So if we take an example of a molecular component from Beamery's design system, for example, then we have multi-select dropdown, where you click a button, it opens up an overlay, and the overlay has a list of checkboxes in it. So although we present that to the user as a single component, it's actually made up of 3 smaller components. And of course, with memes, you can also use memes to create other memes that have new meanings. So we start off with blinking white guy meme, combine that with the first guy 2 meme, and then you end up with breaking the 4th wall meme. And design systems aren't just limited to components, they also include patterns. So a common pattern that we come across in web design is authentication. How do users log on? And the common pattern that we see is that login information is in the same part of the screen each time. So anything to do with authentication and user actions, you'll know exactly where to look for it. In the case of Spotify, we see the login buttons at the top right-hand corner. You click it, log in. This is also a great example of a more molecular components from Atomic Design, and then eventually you'll get taken into the homepage where the login button has now changed to my user profile button, which I click, and then I can do user-driven actions, and it creates an association in the users when they're using it that if they are unfamiliar with your product, then they know, well, they sort of have an idea of where to look for this sort of information without having to go through like documentation or user training. And memes can also appear in the form of patterns. So I wonder if anyone in the room recognizes this pattern or this one. I'm glad someone's getting it, yes. So they're all loss, and in case you don't know what loss is, basically it's you had this episode of this classic webcomic, Control-Alt-Delete, back in 2008, which was it just completely ruined like the tone and vibe of the comic, and it was widely parodied. And the way people would parody it is by emulating the series of characters, the pattern that the characters form in the comic, and basically sneaking it into places where you wouldn't expect. And obviously, if you know about it, then you understand the joke. But I've seen loss pop up in all sorts of things like musical notation. I've seen it in, like, you know, you might have a nice picture of some trees, thinking, oh, that's beautiful. And then you get to the last one and you see a tree falling down, you're like, oh, bloody hell, it's gone again. But yeah, that's loss. Been 15 years, and it's like, oh, right. Design systems aren't just for apps and websites. They can be used for any sort of user interaction. And one of the emerging areas for it will be voice-driven interactions, such as you have with a smart speaker. So Amazon actually has a design system for Alexa, which will ensure that if you are creating an Alexa skill, whether you're working internally at Amazon or you're a third-party app provider, then you can create your skill in such a way that users interact with it in a known and expected way. Because as a user using a smart speaker, I don't want to have to speak to Alexa in a different way and having to know who is, like, you know, made this component, you know, this app skill for me. It's like it should just be the same way every time. And so Amazon actually provides you with utilities to help you do that. And memes can also appear in all sorts of user interactions. For example, you just got rickrolled. I bet you weren't expecting that in a conference. So yeah, the rickroll is a classic pattern where it's not the video itself, which is the meme, but the act of tricking someone into clicking a link. And so yeah, it's pretty much any interaction. That was just in case the technology didn't work in that case. Okay, so design systems are built to meet the requirements of a specific user base or community. So I used to work with the government with the Ministry of Justice, and one of the things with the GovUK design system is that it's really optimized for simplicity and accessibility. And that's because the kind of people who are interacting most with government services, especially with the Ministry of Justice, tend to be people who are the most vulnerable in society, whether that's elderly people who have higher accessibility needs, they need larger text or greater contrast, or it could be people whose only internet access is on an ancient public library computer running Windows XP with a slow as internet connection. And so GovUK design system really has to account for all of those different use cases. Whereas another government project that I was working on was for blue light emergency control rooms. So this is when you call 999, when you know, the person who picks up the phone will be sitting in a control room, and they will use this software that I was working on to help direct the appropriate resource to your location. And these people, you know, they're in it's no public library. The technical, it's very high tech, but they're spending a lot of their day looking at screens, like up to 12-hour shifts, often overnight. And you know, it's one of the things that we had to take into account when we were making the design system for this particular user base is that we wanted to reduce eye strain by making sure that it's a dark color palette, or, like, you know, something that they could optimize for darker rooms, and also reduce eye movement across potentially 3 or 4 monitors, and also providing lots of keyboard shortcuts, which all worked nicely together to help them speed up interactions and get help to people as soon as possible. And now some memes are also built to meet the requirements of a specific user base or community. And obviously I've used some quite well-known memes in this talk and catered them, customized them to meet the needs of this particular community right here, which is people at HalfStack. But sometimes it's the meme formats themselves which are more niche. So as an example, you have Pepe the Frog. Now, Pepe the Frog is, commonly seen on 4chan or alt-right websites, but if you posted it on a, say, left-leaning LGBTQ Facebook page, then you'll probably get downvoted to oblivion. Whereas, if you're a left-leaning US politics nerd, you'll probably get quite a laugh out of Dark Brandon memes. But if you posted that on a QAnon or MAGA Facebook page, then the joke's just going to fly straight over their head. So it's important to use memes in the correct context. Now, design systems can be expanded to include new content, and that's really an essential part of design systems. And sometimes the new content is driven by an in-house team based on new research, and sometimes the contributions are welcome from other members of the organization or through the open source community. So you might think, oh, the GovUK design system, it's government, it's pretty, not everybody can do that, but it actually is open source. So if you have an idea of a component which could be added to the GovUK design system, you're very welcome to raise an issue in GitHub and get it on the roadmap, whether that's as you creating the component for the government or them using their in-house team at GDS to do that for you. And as we all know, new meme formats are contributed by an open source community on the internet, and viral memes then go on to expand the executive canon. So I guess executive canon of memes is memes that we recognize, but there's also meme aggregators such as Know Your Meme that will kind of keep a record of every meme in existence. And finally, ultimately, design systems are there to provide you with ready-made toolkits so you can build new products really quickly. They're meant to be a springboard for innovation that provides high value to your organization. Basically, by freeing up your designers and developers' time so they're not having to constantly reinvent the wheel, they can spend their time doing the real innovative work that delivers the really great value to organizations. A great example of this will be all of the work that's gone in with the COVID pandemic. Not something that people could have predicted, but especially government services had to prepare all of this information extremely quickly, and they were able to leverage existing design systems to do that very successfully. And memes also provide a ready-made toolkit, so you can build new content quickly. So, after the dinner last night, I got home and saw that it was almost World War III. I'm like, oh great, I gotta add this to my presentation. But it's kind of like, by having these formats already existing, then you can create memes which are, really fresh without too much effort. And even if you're really unfunny, then anyone can be a comedian with memes. So let's take a look at the evidence so far. So memes have reusable components and patterns, and they come with guidance, and they're tailored to suit your community and audience. They evolve over time, and they allow you to build new content quickly. So does that mean that memes really are a design system? Hold your horses, we've not covered the case against yet. And I guess when we were looking at those definitions earlier and they had all these buzzwords and jargon, this is where it gets more complicated and where the terms are more abstract, but I'm going to do my best to demystify it. So design systems are designed based on user research to form a singular vision. And by vision, I mean having some sort of upfront strategic thinking about who your design system's for, like what problems it's trying to solve, how it should look and feel, and how it should embody your organization's unique brand and values. You don't have to know every single component and pattern that you're going to add to your design system up front, but when you're developing the design system, it's important to make sure that all of your components and patterns conform to the same vision so they blend in with each other. Because after all, we're using design systems to build real-life products here, and we don't want to create websites that look like Frankenstein's monster. We want to create things that are coherent and make sense when they're presented together. Whereas memes, on the other hand, are created by trial and error, not upfront user research. And I mean, the process of creating a meme really is you see something and think, hey, I'm going to make a meme template out of that. You post it on Facebook or Reddit or wherever. And if people like it, then they'll upvote it. And if people upvote it, then there's more chance that people will copy you. So they also get upvotes. And then that way it becomes viral. But then if it's not, if no people don't like it and they don't upvote it, then chances are it'll just fade into obscurity. And so in order to make your memes stand out, then it's important to do something in a novel or subversive way. They're meant to be eye-catching. You want people to notice them. And that's actually the opposite approach of what design systems will take, in which case you want your components and patterns to blend in with each other, not stand out. And another way that design systems are different is that design systems are prescriptive. So they intentionally limit your scope, so you're guided to solve problems in the same standardized way. So another common web pattern will be user notifications. So a design system will guide your designers and developers to use the same pattern each time to ensure that your users know what to expect. So if they receive a notification, it's in the same part of the screen. They know how to dismiss it. They know how to interact with it. Whereas if the designers and developers decided to solve that problem themselves, then notifications could be popping up all over the place. It would be terribly confusing and annoying. But with memes, well, there's often many memes which express the same type of sentiment. So just a few examples of confusion/doubt here. So you have loads of scope when choosing a meme. There's no meme police telling you, oh, you have to choose like confused mathematics lady. You can choose whichever you want. And if you don't like any of them, then you're very free to make a new one that covers overlaps with existing memes. And no one can stop you doing that. So are memes really a design system? No, but they could be. So if you wanted to make a meme design system, you just have to solve those issues. So you could create a vision for what types of memes you belong in your design system, who the memes are for, what the look and feel of the meme should be, etc. And then you can be prescriptive about which memes should be used in particular circumstances. So for example, with confusion, you could say, you must use blinking white guy as that meme. You can't use any other meme. And then if you commit to maintain and update your design system to ensure it stays relevant, so you make sure there's nice, dank, fresh memes in there all the time, then people, that sounds kind of like a design system to me, but it also sounds like the opposite of fun and not what memes are about at all. So it sounds like a terrible idea, and let's never do that or ever talk about it again. So I've just spoken to you like 20 minutes about, why memes are a design system, but why does it matter? Why am I doing this talk? And it's because the way that we define design systems really does matter. So design systems are a significant and long-term commitment. They cost time, money, and influence. Time because you need to do a lot of upfront research on your users. You have to create this vision. You have to get designers to develop the patterns and components and the styles that you'll use, and developers to write that into code. And then you have to commit to, maintain it and improve it on an ongoing basis. And as we all know, designers and developers aren't cheap. Time is money, and so they are a significant financial commitment as well. And whenever there's a significant financial commitment involved, then chances are you're going to have to do a lot of persuading. You'll have to go to the board. You'll have to convince the finance department. You're basically putting your reputation at risk because you want it to be a success. But if people have different expectations of what you're supposed to be delivering, then there's a chance that you'll let people down. You'll lose their trust, and that's very difficult to gain when it's lost. So it's really important that stakeholders understand what they're signing up for. If there's no common understanding of what a design system is, if people have different definitions of it, then they will have different expectations, and you're really setting yourself up potentially for an expensive failure. For example, if your stakeholders don't understand that to you create a design system, you can't just say, oh, it's a 6-month project, and after that, it's done, and we'll all skip off merrily. No, it's an ongoing commitment. You need to continually develop and improve it, otherwise you could lead to introductions of bugs and security issues, which, would, if that gets known to the public, then that's a significant reputational damage risk. If your developers think it's a bit naff and it's a bit rubbish, then they're just not going to use it. They'll think, what on earth was Stephanie thinking? They'll think that I'm an idiot, and you'll lose a bit of political capital as well. And of course, as we discussed earlier, long gone are the days of GeoCities. People expect a nice, good UX, and if you don't have that, then people will be confused and they'll think, well, it's a bit rubbish, I'll just go and use a competitor, right? So basically, it boils down to a poor return on investment and the potential for reputational damage. Another risk would be if you have poor internal communication, it could mean that people in your organization are unaware that your design system even exists, or they don't know what its benefits are, or they don't understand how to use it to get the most out of it. So if people aren't using it, then your product suite will probably look like Frankenstein's creation, as I mentioned earlier. It's very jarring when you go across different websites and it's just like the UI just like changes like dramatically. Another risk would be, remember that guidance I gave earlier about the buttons and having only one primary call to action? Well, if your developer's understanding of design systems is that it's basically just a component library and they don't have to pay attention to the guidance, well, you could end up with a page with like 20 primary call to actions just because they think it looks nice. And that's really not following the ethos of the design system. Could provide a poor user experience as well. So again, it boils down to a poor return on investment and potential for reputational damage. And of course, with design systems being such a big investment, then it's not always the best choice for companies. So if you have, if you're working on a relatively small product, is it really worth investing that much money and doing all of that overhead for something that will, make a whole suite of components that will only be used a couple of times? I mean, perhaps not. If you're a small team, then sometimes it's just a lot easier to communicate with each other. But additionally, if you're not able to commit people to actually update and maintain the design system, then you run all the risks that we went through in the previous few slides. And another case would be if you're not doing much active development. So you've got a product, you're not really adding new features to it. Well, is it worth adding a design system to that and potentially introducing problems and bugs just because, well, all the big boys are doing it? Perhaps not. But I do think that design systems, in the right circumstances, are a great investment. So I used to work in the NHS during the pandemic, and the NHS design system probably helped to save lives. We all know it wasn't perfect. There were, well-publicized issues with the track and trace program, for example. But really, it empowered remote teams to deliver new products incredibly quickly. It was a lot more than what people expected from, NHS IT systems. And by that, by doing that, it really built on years and years of pre-existing user research and tried and tested code. So product teams were able to focus on how to present the information to users in the most effective way in a really scary situation. And I quite like this quote from Dean Vipond at NHS Digital. He wrote a great series of Medium blog posts about a short history of the NHS design system. So I just thought I'd read out this quote. A design system cannot be merely a collection of front-end components. Design system is the condensed learning of hundreds of practitioners. Every mistake, every wrong turn, every A/B test has contributed to the snapshot you see today. Design systems thrive on the continuous stirring in of new learning, new thinking, and new and more diverse contributors. If a design system atrophies due to the lack of maintenance or new thinking, it will eventually become a risk to innovation rather than the springboard we intend it to be. So if you benefited from using a design system, please think about how you could contribute to its future. Share your learning, propose new patterns, and join the community. I couldn't have put it better myself. And that's about all we have time for today. So I'll just leave you with my 3 key takeaways here. And the first is that design systems are more than just component libraries. We have lots of different definitions and expectations of design systems, and these can potentially lead to poor return on investment and reputational damage. So you have to consider whether a design system really is the best solution for your company and make sure that everybody's on the same page about what it will be delivering. And finally, the design systems, when they're done well and when they're used in the correct circumstances, they can really transform organizations and improve lives, and in the case of the NHS design system, even save lives during the pandemic. So, I mentioned earlier that I'm no design system expert, but at Beamery, we do have a team of experts building our design system. So if you want to hear more about that, my colleague Andre gave a great talk at Design Systems London Meetup, which is on video. So hopefully we'll be able to share a link with you of that later. And that's all I have time for. So if you want to hang out, I'll probably be hanging around the Beamery booth later. If you want to work for a company where they just have like an A-grade meme game, come check out our careers website as well. And I'm not very, I don't have much social media, but I do have a blog on Medium, which if you want to connect with me, do have a read of it and follow me there. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Stephanie.